With 15 minutes of open networking, you'll notice that after the words visitor hosts, there is an asterisk. It's the first asterisk you see in the manual. This is the first of the hidden elements. There are many hidden elements throughout the agenda. This is the first one. There are some that we don't highlight every one, but these are the ones that I think are really important. And that when you get these things right, the meeting is amazing if you get these right. Now, if you don't do every single one, if some of them are pulled out and not done quite right, it's not the end of the world, but the more a chapter gets the hidden elements right, the more dynamic the group is. And this is the first of the hidden elements. And let me talk to you about why I think it's a hidden element. First of all, if you say to a chapter, are the hidden elements, or is a visitor host important? If you say to a chapter, is a visitor host important? They're going to be like a dog in the back of the window of a car, you know those little mechanical dogs with the wind, yeah, of course. Visitor host is important, I know that. They don't get it. Trust me, they don't get it. Let's talk about why the visitor host is important and why I think it's one of the first hidden elements. I did not create visitor hosts. It wasn't my idea. When I started BNI, there was no internet. We didn't have any marketing materials, remember that? And so it was all word of mouth, all referrals, and it pretty much came from one person inviting another person to their own meeting. But then the meetings started to spread, and we opened up all over California, and then we started opening in a couple of different states. And people started coming to the meetings who were not invited by someone from that group. And the way I set BNI up was that if you invited somebody, you were their host. So if you invited them, you took the role of the host. Two problems with that. One was we were expanding, and people were starting to go to groups that they weren't invited directly from because they didn't live near there or work near there. That problem I saw. The problem I didn't anticipate was not all members are created equal as visitor hosts. Some are good hosts, some are not so good of hosts. And so, and we didn't even have the position visitor host. It didn't exist. It was just you were the individual's host. So we were seeing these problems starting to arise. I wasn't quite sure what to do with it. And it really kind of all came to a head about 87 or so, 88. When I went to a chapter here in Southern California, it was the Beverly Hills chapter. Most of you have heard of Beverly Hills, yeah? Okay. Now, I know this is going to come as a shock to you, but the Beverly Hills group was pretty cliquish. Right? I know, everybody's like, really? Beverly Hills? Go figure. So, I don't know how that translates for our translators, but they were a little bit cliquish.
What is cliquish?
Cliquish. How would you describe cliquish?
When a group of people get together and exclude others.
Yeah. Petrus and I here, we're friends. Stay away. You don't qualify. You can't, you know what I mean? You get these little groups, cliques of people working together, and they don't connect with others. So anyway, I went to this group. There was a membership committee issue. There was a problem with a member, and they asked me to come and help them out. And it was a serious enough problem that we actually had to talk. The committee met before the meeting and after the meeting. But when I was on my way the night before I left, my staff said, hey, there's a visitor that's going to be there. And of course, we didn't have anyone to welcome them. There's a visitor who's going to be there who came from another area. And so she doesn't know anyone there. Would you make sure to welcome her? And I said, sure. And I showed up to Beverly Hills and looked for this visitor, and there she was. And I introduced myself, and I welcomed her to the group. And I said, I wish I could stay and talk to you, but I got to get to this membership committee thing before the meeting. And I went over there. Meeting was over, and we went right back into the membership committee meeting, and so I didn't really have a chance to talk to her. But I happened to bump into her about 3 months later at a Chamber of Commerce mixer. And I saw her, and she was wearing a BNI badge. And I said, hey, I see, great to see you again. I'm glad to see you joined the Beverly Hills group. And she said, oh, yeah, I didn't join Beverly Hills. I said, really? You didn't join? Now, Beverly Hills had 35 members. And, again, I think I mentioned this yesterday, groups of 30 members or more were kind of rare. I mean, they were extremely rare back then. And so that was really our best chapter that we had of all the groups. It was one of the very top chapters. And I said, well, what group? Because I was surprised she didn't do that. I said, join that group. What group did you join? She said, I joined Century City. Now, Century City is right next to Beverly Hills here in Southern California. But the Century City chapter literally had half the membership. It had 16 members. And Beverly Hills actually had, I think, about 32. So 30-some and 16. And I was really curious why she would join Century City. When Beverly Hills had an opening, I spoke to the leadership team. They said they'd love to have her as a member. But she joined Century City. And I thought that was so strange. And I said, well, I'm really curious. Why, may I ask, why did you decide to join Century City and not Beverly Hills? And I'll never forget her answer. It's been over 20 years. And she said to me, the Beverly Hills chapter, the members there really seem to all like each other a lot. But nobody reached out to me. Nobody connected with me. Nobody even had a conversation with me except you. And you're not a member of the group. So they were polite, but not engaging. And they all really just seemed to like each other mostly. And I said, wow, I'm really sorry to hear that. But so you joined Century City. What happened? What was the difference? She said, yeah, I called your office. I had heard so many good things about BNI. I wanted to check out another chapter and see if, maybe there was a difference. And so I was referred to Century City, and she said, wow, what a difference. I said, how? What, it's a small group. Well, what's the difference? She said, well, first of all, I walked through the door, and there, standing at the entrance, is this person with a ribbon, and the ribbon said, visitor host. I said, visitor host, what's that? I did. What's that? Well, the visitor host is the person who welcomes any visitors to the group. I said, how does that work? Well, what do they do? She said, well, first thing the visitor host did was showed me how breakfast worked, because Beverly Hills was really confusing, because I came in, I sat down, and then I didn't really get to choose what I wanted, and I just got this bill. Nobody told me. It was just a little confusing. Whereas she came over, she took me to a table, she had me pick what breakfast I wanted. I found out what it would cost. I got a little tag. She then walked me over, sat me down, and then she walked me around and introduced me to every single member of the chapter. I met, shook hands, and spoke with every single member. And about halfway through, there was another visitor. And going with this other visitor was another person who had a ribbon who said, visitor host. I said, visitor host, there's two of them? She said, yes, there's two visitor hosts. And she said, well, I said, well, what happened then? She said, well, the visitor host introduced the other visitor to me, and we spoke, just like with everyone else, and then we both went on our ways, and we got back around, and I met all 16 members before the meeting started. And right before the meeting started, the visitor host asked me for 2 copies of my business card, and I gave her 2 copies of my business card. And then she asked me to pronounce my last name, and I noticed that she wrote it down phonetically. Now, she had one of these Eastern European names that have more consonants than vowels, and Americans can never get it right. We just cannot get those names right the first time. And so she worked with her to spell it out phonetically. And she thought that was unusual, but, it's okay. She's being very polite. So she got that. She said, I sat down. They ran a great meeting. It was every bit as good as Beverly Hills. It was a smaller group, but really good meeting. Lots of energy. Everyone liked each other and liked the visitors. It was really a great meeting. And when we got to the visitors having a chance to stand and introduce themselves, the president looked over at me, and I noticed he had that card that the visitor host had written. And he introduced me, and he nailed my name. He nailed it. He got it perfectly right. She said, nobody ever gets my name right the first time. She obviously had coached him on how to pronounce my name. Just another little thing to make me feel welcome to the group. And I was just so impressed with the little things that this group did to give me a good experience. So when the meeting got to the end, I was asked to stick around and do a visitor orientation. I said, visitor orientation, what's that? I didn't know what a visitor orientation was. So she said, well, what they do is they sit down and they tell you what's in the, what the card file is and how they keep copies of everyone's business cards. And all those slips that I was seeing passed around, I didn't understand what they were. And I was shown the referral slips and explained what is a legitimate referral and how the referrals work. And then I was handed a copy of an application. I was given an application and I was told, press firmly, there's a copy. And I did. Now, trainer, time out for a second here, okay? She was handed an application and was told, press firmly, there's a copy, and I did. How many times do we not ask a visitor if they want to join? Just ask. Now look, yesterday I said don't try to talk people into it, and I stand by that. Don't try to talk people into it, but there's nothing wrong with asking them to fill out an application. You can then still do the interview. But asking them to fill out the application is a no-brainer. We do that in every business. Ask for the sale, ask for the commitment, ask for them to sign up. And so I used to, many years ago, do something that in retrospect was really, I think, silly. I used to say to people, before I would give them an application, you don't need to fill out an application today. You can come back a second time and check out the meeting again. Any of you have ever done that or seen that done? Yeah. So one day, an insurance salesman said to me, Ivan, why do you do that? And I said, what do you mean, why do I do that? He said, well, why do you tell them don't fill out an application, come back again? I said, because they can. He said, I know they can, but why do you pitch that as the approach they should take? I said, I don't know. What do you mean? He said, well, imagine that I, as an insurance agent, have an opportunity to go into, do a presentation for people on my insurance services, and I sit down with them, and it takes about an hour and a half to go through everything. And I do, the little funnel that talks about income and revenues and retirement planning, and I do all of this. And at the end of my presentation, I say, I know you've seen what I can do, and you've seen my program, but don't make a decision today. Let me come back next week and do the exact same presentation and then decide whether this is for you or not. I said, that would be stupid. You said, yes, it would. Why do you do it? And I said, because I'm doing something stupid. That doesn't make sense when you put it that way. And so I changed that. And I changed that really with this, in part with this epiphany of what the visitor host was doing. Is here's a copy of the application. Press firmly, there's a copy. That is an assumed consent clause. Now, when they say, you know what, I need to think about it, that's great. Don't talk anyone into this. But on the other hand, if they fill it out, now's the opportunity for you to have that conversation, that interview, to make sure that it's a good fit with somebody. So let's go back to the story. She said, they said, press firmly, there's a copy, and I did. I took it, and I was happy to apply. And she said, I love this group, and I have a prediction to make. I said, what's that? She said, I predict that by the end of the year, and it was about 8-9 months away, by the end of the year, the Century City chapter is going to be bigger than the Beverly Hills group. Now, the Beverly Hills group had been around a few years. It was one of my biggest groups. Century City, not so much. And so I said to her, well, it's good to have goals. That's a good thing. But I didn't think there was any chance that within, just 8 months that they would be bigger than the Beverly Hills group. Who do you think was wrong? Dead wrong. I was absolutely wrong. At the 8-9 months later, I'm looking at the numbers. Beverly Hills had dropped down into the 20s, and Century City was over 30 members. They were over 30 members. The day I saw that number was the day I picked up the telephone, called the Century City chapter, spoke to the president and said, could you tell me about this visitor host thing you've got going? And they sent me the job description or role description for the visitor host, and about 75% of what you now have in this manual is still the exact same thing I got from Century City over 20 years ago. And that That's what we now train. And these are some of the hidden elements. So that when you say to a chapter, a visitor host is important, they go, yeah, I get it. That's fine. But when you go back and you talk about the history and give perspective and explain the way it was and how it is and why it is so important and how the little things make a huge difference. Remember, I spoke briefly yesterday about the visitor experience. That's all part of the visitor experience. You know, you'd like to think that people will just show up and they see all the referrals being passed and they say, I want a piece of this. But that's not true. They want a good experience. They want to feel welcome. When people come to a group and they don't feel welcome, sometimes it doesn't matter how much business is generated. Beverly Hills was passing a lot of business. They passed more business at their group than the Century City chapter was passing. So why would someone say, yeah, I don't want that? They'd say it because they didn't feel comfortable with the people in the room. It's all about people's experiences. They have to have good experiences. And the visitor host is really an important individual for a great experience. And so when you're training visitor hosts, don't just talk to them about what they have to do. Don't talk to them just about the how. Talk to them about the why this is so important. Why something as simple as writing a name phonetically makes somebody feel really good about the group. These are the little things. These are part of the hidden elements that when you understand and see, you go, I get it. I get it now. That makes sense to me.